God and Science by John W. Dawley. Copyrighted by the John W. Dawley Trust. Narrated by Michael Drew. Chapter 1. The Wedding of Science and Religion. The Choice Before Us. During the past century, the advance of physical science appears to have so far outstripped progress in moral and spiritual matters that men find themselves at a stage in human development where a vital decision must be made. The critical uncertainty of the future and the threat of another world war in our generation, in which material science has made it possible for whole cities to be wiped out overnight, force us all to face the question today: will we blindly follow the road of material conclusions, or will we take a higher road and discern that a new era is dawning, an era which demands that men become thinkers, and not only thinkers, but spiritual revolutionaries? History indicates that it is hardly ever possible in human affairs to attain a measure of real evolution without the process of revolution of some kind, mental if not physical. It would seem that the impulsion of true evolution first exposes in their nakedness all those elements which hinder progress, and then eradicates them, and that this must take place before real progress can result. To take the short view of the present world problems would be to regard them as calamitous, whilst the longer view would grasp some idea of the great attainment that these human problems but portend. It is a significant fact that when the world's greatest Christian thinker, Jesus of Nazareth, essayed to tell his followers of the ultimate of spiritual fulfillment, he forewarned them that this would be ushered in by much of the same conditions as we are facing today, that is, wars and rumours of wars. Most of us are only too well aware of the immediate crisis, but so few of us understand the cause of it or the remedy for it. Surely those who can ken the morn through the darkest night are the ones to whom humanity must always look in its march toward progress and freedom. The mass mesmerism of the ages. We have witnessed in the last few years, and are still witnessing, the disastrous effects of mass mesmerism and the willingness of men to succumb to it. Such mesmerism may have seemed to be primarily the outcome of the thinking of an individual or of a body of individuals. But surely what we are always faced with is the stupendous effect of the mass mesmerism of the ages, which is now reaching its climax in a materially scientific era. That well-known physical scientist, the late Leconte de Nuit, in his book Human Destiny, pertinently applies the term hereditary to the centuries of material theories which constitute man's background. He writes, "It is against this hereditary, against this immense accumulation of memories, by now deprived of any meaning, and dating back to epochs forever vanished, that man must fight to prepare the advent of the spiritual being he is destined to become." This hereditary, this vast accumulation of material theories and their effects, is surely coming into full view at the present time, only that it may be transformed by advancing thought based on idealism that is both spiritual and scientific. The long vision will always see beyond the impending chaos and perceive to some extent the advancing spiritual era, whilst the limited outlook remains overwhelmed by the confusion induced by mass mesmerism. Today's demand and opportunity. In this connection, it's interesting to note that the Central Advisory Council for Education in England, in their pamphlet School and Life, report as follows. There is no need to emphasize here the material benefits man enjoys as a result of discovery and invention, nor the tremendous changes made in man's ideas of the universe and of himself by modern scientific ideas of space, by the theory of evolution, and by explorations into the nature of man's mind. Nor is there need to stress the contribution made to the ideals of integrity of thought, exactness of reasoning, and devotion to new truth. One result, however, has been that for a large number of men and women, science has been enthroned as the authority and hope for man's future. For them, science has displaced God, and the scientific tradition has eclipsed both the Christian and the classical lights. On the other hand, Viscount Samuel concluded in his Romanes lecture, delivered at Oxford in May 1947, with these words: "It is often said that an age is seldom able to understand itself. Perhaps it is so with us now. After all, the first half of this 20th century has had great achievements. It may be that its failures will be redeemed in the second. It may be that posterity will look back upon this very time as one of the great formative periods in human history. It may yet prove to be an age illustrious in the domains of religion, philosophy, the arts, as it is already in science. But posterity may say also that such was the irony of events, the people of our time, even the people of this country, who've contributed so powerfully to every one of those achievements and possibilities, did not recognize the age for what it was. Their own thought was tinged with pessimism. All this, of course, is mere speculation. At any moment, next year, in 10 years, 20, some cruel events of men's own making may shatter such hopes to pieces. Yet that may not be so either. Perhaps we may be standing even now at the dawn of a day of splendour, of a second and finer renaissance. There is in those hopes nothing impossible, nothing beyond our powers. The question is whether our will can rise to match our opportunity. An advanced thinker of today, Lance L. White, said in a recent talk on the radio entitled "Towards a Science of Man," "When the historian from the distant future looks back on our times, what is going to seem to him the outstanding characteristic of this century? If the next 50 years continues like the last, he will have to call it the century of human self-destruction, or something like that. But it is foolish to measure the future merely by the past. There is a unique situation now which no experience of the past enables us to gauge completely. Moreover, there is another side to our age, just as real as the clash of power and doctrine, and possibly in the long run even more important. And I suggest that our age may come to be known as the first century of the science of man. A comprehensive science of man, providing a balanced image of man, can repair the damage done by an abstract, partial, or unbalanced science. For scientific thought has today unique prestige, and, just as an unbalanced science was bound to damage mankind, as was foreseen, so we can now foresee that a balanced science can heal mankind, and that nothing else will. For today, only a science of man can tell how man will live, in order to develop his capacities to the full. But if science does this, then it has ceased to be merely a system of knowledge available for the control of external nature, and becomes, in addition, a system of ethics used by man in controlling his own nature. But there is another, a subjective, reason why the time is ripe for a science of man. In the West, at any rate, man is now more preoccupied with himself than ever before. He's more worried about his own predicament, and more concerned to use all available methods to try to understand himself than at any earlier time. At one level, this is shown by the flood of writing on the condition of man, the problem of man, the future of man, the first and last men, on man's conception of himself, whether individualistic or collective, religious or biological. Such heightened awareness always marks the collapse of an old tradition, when the need is felt for new foundations. Now it is acute. Today, nearly everyone who can spare a moment from his private troubles or pleasures knows that the race is involved in a challenge to its survival. There is, in fact, striking evidence that humanity is at present on the verge of a great mental and spiritual awakening to a fuller sense of what constitutes man, his rights, his responsibilities, and his mission. Religion in the modern world. Moreover, not a few thinkers are arriving at the very definite conclusion that the teachings of the Bible or fundamental religious thought offer the only way of escape from humanity's plight. But in no instance does it seem that any serious attempt is being made to show specifically how the Bible and fundamental religion can now bring about a result which they have failed to accomplish in 2,000 years. If they are to be of real value in this scientific age, then undoubtedly a new conception of religion and the message of the Bible is called for. And this new conception must satisfy the reasonable demands of the thinking man of today. Dr. Whitehead, the well-known philosopher and scientist, in his book Science and the Modern World, writes of religion, "For over 2 centuries, religion has been on the defensive, and on a weak defensive. The period has been one of unprecedented intellectual progress. In this way, a series of novel situations have been produced for thought. Each such occasion has found the religious thinkers unprepared. Something which has been proclaimed to be vital has finally, after struggle, distress, and anathema, been modified and otherwise interpreted. The next generation of religious apologists then congratulates the religious world on the deeper insight which has been gained. The result of the continued repetition of this undignified retreat during many generations has at last almost entirely destroyed the intellectual authority of religious thinkers. Consider this contrast. When Darwin or Einstein proclaim theories which modify our ideas, it is a triumph for science. We do not go about saying there's another defeat for science because its old ideas have been abandoned. We know that another step of scientific insight has been gained. Religion will not regain its old power until it can face change in the same spirit as does science. Its principles may be eternal, but the expression of those principles requires continual development. Professor J.S. Haldane, in his book The Sciences and Philosophy, says of the future of religion, "I have not the slightest fear for the future of religion, but it seems to me that the influence of the churches is certain to dwindle more and more unless supernatural belief is banished from their teaching." When that day comes, the churches will be able to fight practical materialism and everything in modern life that drags us downward, with weapons which will not fail. Religion will also go hand in hand with the sciences, as it once did, and like them will appeal to all men, irrespective of their nationality or scientific conceptions. Alan Richardson, B.D., Canon of Durham, writes in his book Christian Apologetics, "In our modern age, the consideration of Christian apologetics must inevitably raise the question of the methodology of theological science in relation to that of the sciences in general. Since we live in an age which has been taught to submit every claim to knowledge to the test of the scientific method, no approach on the part of Christian apologists to the modern mind is likely to be effective which does not demonstrate the ability of our theological knowledge successfully to undergo that test and so to justify itself at the bar of rational scientific inquiry. Granted that our present problems are due to the fact that the materialistic theories of many millions of years are now reaching a climax and being organized on a materially scientific basis, then it's obvious that this situation can only be dealt with through idealism that is not only spiritual and good, but is also essentially scientific. The meaning of science. At this point we must bear in mind what is meant by the term scientific. Consider some dictionary definitions of the term science. The Oxford Dictionary defines it in part as follows: a branch of study which is concerned either with a connected body of demonstrated truths or with observed facts systematically classified and more or less colligated by being brought under general laws, and which includes trustworthy methods for the discovery of new truth within its own domain. Webster defined science, in part, as accumulated and accepted knowledge which has been systemized and formulated with reference to the discovery of general truths or the operation of general laws, knowledge classified and made available in work, life, or the search for truth. Funk and Wagnall's Practical Standard Dictionary says of science, knowledge of a single fact, not known as related to any other, or of many facts not known as having any mutual relations or as comprehended under any general law, does not reach the meaning of science. Science is knowledge reduced to law and embodied in system. From these definitions, it's evident that any subject that can be classified and systemized exactly and intelligently and made available in work, life, or the search for truth is entitled to the term science, and it is in this sense that the word is used in this book. Many people believe that nothing is scientific but that which pertains to physical and material conditions. If one talks to the ordinary person about science, he concludes that one is referring to the study of physical phenomena. This view is, however, rapidly changing, and Dunuy, for instance, in his brilliant analysis of the material universe, reveals that it's not based on exact science at all, but rather on what he terms perfect disorder. Indeed, it is now recognized in some measure that our conclusions regarding the universe can never be self-consistent, that is, wholly scientific, while our fundamentals are of a physical nature. Sir Arthur Eddington, in his famous book, The Nature of the Physical World, writes, "Strict causality is abandoned in the material world. Our ideas of the controlling laws are in process of reconstruction, and it is not possible to predict what kind of form they will ultimately take. But all the indications are that strict causality has dropped out permanently. The world of physics is a world contemplated from within, surveyed by appliances which are part of it and subject to its laws. What the world might be deemed like, if probed in some supernatural manner by appliances not furnished by itself, we do not profess to know." He also writes in his book New Pathways in Science, "Our present conception of the physical world is hollow enough to hold almost anything. I think the reader will agree. There may indeed be a hint of ribaldry in his hearty assent." Is humanity in general, then, to continue to accept the belief that only material things can be classified as scientific, whereas the flow and operation of spiritual thought and idea, which is all-important and is really the substance of essential being, cannot be so regarded? Fortunately, many scientists frankly acknowledge that the fundamentals of our universe are, in the final analysis, to be found in the realm of thought and idea. Sir James Jeans says in The Mysterious Universe, "Today there is a wide measure of agreement, which on the physical side of science approaches almost to unanimity, that the stream of knowledge is heading toward a non-mechanical reality. The universe begins to look more like a great thought than like a great machine. Mind no longer appears as an accidental intruder into the realm of matter. We are beginning to suspect that we ought rather to hail it as the creator and governor of the realm of matter, not of course our individual minds, but the mind in which the atoms out of which our individual minds have grown exist as thoughts." And Eddington, in his book The Nature of the Physical World, says it's difficult for the matter-of-fact physicist to accept the view that the substratum of everything is of mental character. But no one can deny that the mind is the first and most direct thing in our experience, and all else is remote inference either intuitive or deliberate, where science and religion can meet. It's therefore not far-fetched to hope that the physical scientist and the progressive religionist may, in the near future, find themselves at one in their conclusions, for they are both vitally interested in the nature of reality, one from the point of view of reason, and the other from the point of view of revelation. As they are both in earnest in their search, it is certain that at some stage they must find themselves on the same road. In this connection, it is to be remembered that music, art, literature, mathematics, physics, and many other subjects owe their introduction into human experience to a great extent to the Church, and at one time organized religion controlled the development of these subjects in every detail. Eventually, however, artists and scientists had to break away from the control of ecclesiasticism in order that there might be natural development. May not the same thing happen today with scientific religion? May not men find that in order to exercise their divine right to think spiritually and scientifically and in an unrestricted way about essential realities, they're forced to break away in some measure not only from the conclusions of organized religion, but also from those of merely physical science? There are physical scientists who refuse to regard anything as scientific but that which pertains to the material, and on the other hand there are many religionists who believe that God is a mystical being, and who can only be approached mystically and through what is termed faith or religious sentiment. There may be mutual respect between such scientists and religionists, but their views are incompatible. E. Griffith Jones writes in Peake's Commentary on the Bible of the mystic's approach to God. The mystic claims to reach this knowledge of God by means of the inner light. He repudiates all appeal to external authority. Because it is external, it can have no real bearing on conscience, which must and can only be illuminated from within. Without disparaging the priceless services rendered to religion by the mystics, and allowing that they are right in claiming the possibility of an immediate vision of the divine, their method, uncorrected by any independent standard, is too subjective in character, too vague in its results, to satisfy the needs of the average soul. The most fruitful mystics have been those nurtured in an atmosphere of objective religion, which has corrected their indefiniteness of statement, and their tendency to substitute a morbid introspection for sound teaching and healthy activity. Nor do the mystics always agree in their readings of the will of God. Some are nobly sane and practical in thought, others full of extravagance and mistiness. Who shall judge between them? Clearly, while mysticism is one way of coming into fruitful touch with the divine realities, it is not the only way, nor is it a sure way. Other religionists believe in the supreme value of fixed doctrines, but neither the mystic nor the adherent of dogma has so far been willing, except in very few cases, to admit that God can be approached both spiritually and scientifically. The problem, then, resolves itself into two heads. The physical scientist must needs face the proposition that absolute science and truth can only be found in the realm of basic spiritual thought and idea. The religionist must realize that spiritual things can only be vital and practical if they are regarded scientifically. He has to face the proposition that the infinite cause is the most definite factor in all the world, and must therefore be approached intelligently and scientifically, though on a spiritual basis. What could be more spiritual and more scientific than Jesus' teaching and demonstrations, which were epitomized in his unqualified statement, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free"? Could the physical scientists ever declare, with regard to material things, "Ye shall know the truth," and add, with certainty, "It shall make you free"? But the world's greatest metaphysician implied that there was universal and absolute truth to be known and understood, and that, when demonstrated, it would bring freedom from all that is unlike spiritual reality. The leaven of truth. It is indeed cause for gratitude that every now and then some great thinker in the realm of physical science or religion grasps a measure of reality and rises beyond the limits of his particular field to voice a degree of absolute truth. The author is fully aware of the many and great contributions to a higher understanding of reality made by unselfed and far-seeing men and women through inspired sentiment and example. Moreover, he is convinced that the acceptance of a more exact and spiritual process of thought in relation to divine reality will only illustrate that all exalted attainments are based in some degree on the pure science of reality, although perhaps unconsciously. Some striking examples of progressive vision are contained in the following statements. The first was written by a mathematical genius and scholar of divinity in the 17th century. The second, by one of America's best-known writers and philosophers. The third, by one of the world's foremost electrical engineers. And the fourth, by a well-known physical scientist of recent time. The following prayer is attributed to Dr. Isaac Barrow. God always acts geometrically. How great a geometrician art thou, O Lord! For while this science has no bound, there is for ever room for the discovery of new theorems, even by human faculties. Thou art acquainted with them all at one view, without any train of consequences, without any wearisome application of demonstrations. In other arts and sciences, our understanding is able to do almost nothing, and, like the imagination of brutes, seems only to dream of some uncertain propositions. Whence it is that in so many men are almost so many minds. But in these geometrical theorems all men are agreed. In these the human faculties appear to have some real abilities. In those great, wonderful, and amazing Thee, therefore do I take occasion to love and rejoice in and admire, and to pant after that day with the earnest breathings of my soul, when thou shalt be pleased out of thy bounty, out of thy immense and sacred benignity, to grant me the favour to perceive, and that with a pure mind and clear vision, not only those truths, but those also which are more numerous and more important. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote in The Conduct of Life, "The religion which is to guide and fulfil the present and coming ages, whatever else it be, must be intellectual. The scientific mind must have a faith, which is science. There will be a new church founded on moral science. At first cold and naked, a babe in a manger again, the algebra and mathematics of ethical law, the church of men to come, without shawns or psaltery or sackbut, but it will have heaven and earth for its beams and rafters, science for symbol and illustration. It will fast enough gather beauty, music, picture, poetry." Charles P. Steinmetz, one of America's famous electrical engineers, stated in Church Federation, June 1930, "I think the greatest discovery will be made along spiritual lines. Here is a force which history clearly teaches has been the greatest power in the development of men and history. Yet we have merely been playing with it, and have never seriously studied it as we have the physical forces. Some day people will learn that material things do not bring happiness, and are of little use in making men and women creative and powerful. Then the scientists of the world will turn their laboratories over to the study of God and prayer, and the spiritual forces, which, as yet, have hardly been scratched. When this day comes, the world will see more advancement in one generation than it has seen in the last 4. Sir James Jeans, in his book Physics and Philosophy, states, "For 50 years, off and on, Leibniz was trying to devise a precise technical language and to construct a calculus for philosophy. He hoped to find that all the fundamental ideas of reasoning could be reduced to a very small number of primitive elements, or root notions, each of which could then be designated by a universal character or symbol, like the symbols of algebra. If once this could be done, it ought to be possible to construct a calculus for the operation of these symbols." But his efforts failed, and more recent attempts of the same kind have been applicable at most to small regions of the whole province of thought. The result is that philosophy still struggles to express itself in the inadequate words of common speech. In discussing these problems, we have to deal with subtle and delicate shades of meaning, and to travel in fields of thought which are far removed from those of our everyday life. This would seem to demand a perfectly precise, perfectly flexible, and perfectly refined instrument. Ordinary language is none of these things. It is a rough, practical tool which the common man, or the unthinking savage before him, has developed from his first rough contacts with the world to express the ideas which arose out of those contacts. The Bible, the scientific way of salvation. The vital question then arises for the thinker to consider. Can the ideas of reality and divinity, which we term the things of spirit, be approached on a truly scientific as well as a spiritual basis? Surely Lord Gifford, who established the Gifford Lectures on natural theology toward the end of the last century, must have envisaged the possibility of such a thing, for he wrote, "I wish the lecturers to treat their subject as a strictly natural science, the greatest of all possible sciences, indeed, in one sense, the only science, that of infinite being, without reference to or reliance upon any supposed special, exceptional, or so-called miraculous revelation. I wish it considered just as astronomy or chemistry is." Bearing in mind the real meaning of the term science, the author now proposes to advance the all-important proposition that the teachings of the Bible are truly scientific in the purest sense, and can be studied, understood, and proved practical as exact spiritual science. It is quite obvious to most people that the scriptural teachings are symbolized by numberless physical objects, such as the sun, the moon, and the stars, the mustard seed, the sheep, the cattle, the fig tree, and by religious sentiment of every kind. Yet it has never been fully recognized that there is also to be found in the Bible an exact scientific and spiritual system of symbolizing the ideas of reality, through which all men can learn and prove conclusively the fundamental nature of spiritual truth. The author is convinced that the understanding of absolute truth as contained in the Bible will enable men to lay hold on and utilize a definite calculus of spiritual ideas, all expressing the nature of divine power and fundamental being. If it is recognized that mind is the basic fact of everything in the universe, then it is clear that these spiritual ideas, when entertained, understood, and used, must necessarily be dynamic in human experience. If this is true, there opens to humanity a vista of the way whereby it can overcome the hopeless chaos of materialism. Would it not be a marvelous thing if the Bible, in this scientific era, was found to be not only the spiritual but also the scientific way of salvation from materialism and from the apathy of conventional religion? Does not the very idea of this send a thrill of hope and deep expectancy through the mind of every real thinker? Christ Jesus said, "Search the Scriptures, for in them ye find ye have eternal life, and they are they which testify of me." And he also said, "Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away." Are not the divine facts, as taught in the Scriptures, and which he fully elucidated and demonstrated, ever the spiritual and scientific way of salvation? Only a scientific thinker on the highest spiritual basis could have walked on the water, stilled the tempest, fed the multitude, cleansed the leper, overcome all manner of sin, and raised the dead. The author is aware that these views are revolutionary, but he is also completely convinced that nothing can now save humanity but a revolutionary understanding and proof of spiritual values. Our individual responsibility. Is our age now prepared to face the fact that, if it wants to understand reality and also to experience the results of such an understanding, this demands the most earnest, consistent, and exact thought on the highest spiritual and intellectual level? Here let us remember that the word intellectual fundamentally means perceptible only to inspired vision or by spiritual insight. Webster. Is it not the inherent right and duty of every individual to think unreservedly and progressively about the deep things of reality? The record of history certainly indicates that spiritual progress has generally come through the individual, whilst the attempt to organize the outcome of spiritual vision has usually submerged inspiration. No one can think for another on this subject, any more than he could in the study of music or mathematics. Each must think for himself. Will the individual take this simple but vital course, or is he going to be content to delude himself with the outworn superstition that he must give a great deal of time and thought to studying music, mathematics, engineering, and material science, but that he can hope to attain harmony, peace, satisfaction, and real progress in spiritual matters by careless and casual mental drifting? Is the average man also content to believe that lip service to a particular creed or religion can aid him in ridding the world of the grim spectres of evil and materialism? It would indeed be childish to believe such things. If humanity will seek to understand eternal reality, and will consecrate thought and effort to studying and imbibing the deep exactness of scientific truth, as taught and illustrated by the prophets and Christ Jesus, then every man will find that, through inspired and ordered thought, he can use and prove the realities of being in every detail of human experience, to demonstrate harmony. He will also learn to deal with the problem of evil and materialism through intelligent analysis and exposure, and thus finally bring about the destruction of evil thought and purpose.